Evolutionary.org, episode 637 is coming your way. Today we have a special interview with EVO VIP JigglyBuff. In JigglyBuff, you can come on the forum and check out her log on the forum, and she has a really good log going, which is called Female IFBB Pro 2026 Road to Olympia Qualification Journal. You can do basically what you can do up on the search button on the top right. You can search by member and put JigglyBuff, JigglyBuff, and you could search for her, see her posts, and then in her signature, as all of us do, Mobster does, I do, we all have our logs in our signature, so it's easy to find. So definitely check that one out. This is a great episode to show your girlfriend, your wife, your niece, your aunt, to really get them motivated to hit it. First, to remind everyone, we are on Apple, we are on Spotify, we're on different platforms out there. Smash the like button, tell your friends and family. We want to continue to grow this podcast. We're already the top bodybuilding podcast in the world. We want to become the top podcast overall in the world. That is our goal. So JigglyBuff, thank you for showing up today, and we're really appreciate you coming on.
Hi everyone. I'm honored that you guys have me on. So happy to be here. I'm glad we could make it work despite the time differences.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. Something that I've been doing for the most recent shows, especially all the interviews, Jiggly, is thanking those particular people for coming on. I want to make a particular extra effort today, and this is more as much for yourself as for the benefit of the listeners, as in my reasoning. So we thank our interviewees for coming on because they help make Evolutionary's community what it is, and especially in most recent months when that community has grown even more than it was before, and it has always been a community. But I want to make a particular effort today purely and simply because Jiggly is a very high-level athlete in her particular field. And I believe, as Steve said in the pre-show to Jiggly, it's almost unique for us, not just because it's very rare for us to have females on, but of a caliber of the athlete that she is. So on behalf of the forum, the members, the moderators, myself and Steve, and the bosses on the forum, thank you very much for coming on today.
No, it's my honor. I think it's such a great opportunity to be able to do these things because the more that people share in these podcasts, it's the more everyone gets to learn. And it's just not like, a regular podcast where, you ask basic questions and people give basic, very simplistic answers where no one really gets anything answered. So I'm happy to make that change with the two of you.
So exactly. Sorry, Steve. We want these shows, especially today's show, to motivate women, to inform people about the reality of what you're doing. So go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I was going to ask, and we talked about it on the pre-show, but talk a little bit to the listeners out there. Introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us your history, your childhood. Where did you grow up? You have a very fascinating accent. Even though you're in Australia, you obviously don't sound like you're an Australian. So tell us a little bit about your history and your childhood and how'd you get into sports and weight training and bodybuilding and all that good stuff. Maybe take us back in time.
Okay, so I'm only in Australia because my boyfriend works here. I moved over, so I'm actually new to the country itself. But just my whole life, I spent 2 decades. I'm mid-20s. I'm from Singapore. I started training bodybuilding 2021. I know I don't look and sound like it, but I think that's why a lot of me as an athlete, I like to join these forums because I get to learn from people and I get to share what I learned along the way. Because a lot of me is, you have that kind of imposter syndrome when you're also successful too fast as an athlete. So so to take you guys back, 2021, I was doing Chinese martial arts. I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with the Chinese martial arts sport, Wushu. I was doing that, representing Singapore for a very long time, since I was 10 years old. And then upon going to, eventually I retired because that sport is heavily laden with injuries. I dislocated my kneecaps twice.
Oh, wow.
So yeah. And at that point, even though I had insurance, my parents were quite the kind that were okay, if my child wants to do well in something, they would go all out with me. So when I made the decision to retire, they were not very happy about it. And then come university, um, I decided to branch out into track and field, try running the 400 meters. And within my first year, I was picked for the World University Games. And then, it's kind of, and then I fell sick after running for a year. And it was pretty bad. Like, I don't know what was going on. I had like a very bad food poisoning incident. And I'm not sure if everyone has experienced this, but sometimes when you go through like a bad bout of stomach flu, your digestive system is just not the same anymore afterwards for a while. So I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
going through that phase where I would run like 2 rounds around the track and I would feel like throwing up, or I just don't digest my food very well. So my coach was like, you know what, you can't run. You should just sit out, and when you're well enough, you come back to running. And it was just like absolutely heartbreaking for me at that point, because when you're so close to running for like a world game and then you have to like take a back seat again for like a second retirement, it's like it's messed
Yeah.
up, man. And then and
It's
at that
tough.
point I
Yeah.
was like, I was only like 20, 21 years old. So
Mhm.
so that happened. And that was exceptionally hard for me because I had already experienced two retirements in two sports before I
Yeah.
was 21.
That's
Can I,
tough.
can I
Then
bump, can I jump in just for a second here, Steve? I think there might even be an argument to be made, Jiggly, that because you've done so well so quickly, and also because you were only 21 years of age, at that age, it can feel like, well, that's my fucking career over. It's really weird. I'm lucky in some ways that when I had my major injury that I've mentioned on other shows, 16 weeks with a back issue, my psychology was this is a blip. This is nothing. This is only 16 weeks
100%.
out of the 40 something years training. But for you, your career at that point was only 5, 6, 7 years old. And you've already, as you just said, retired twice from something which for you at that time is in your formative years. It can feel like, well, my athletic career is over. But obviously, as we're going to discuss today, that's not the case. So talk about your journey from that point forward.
Okay, so I experienced that two retirements before like age 21. And okay, so my parents are the sort of Asian parents, and everyone has that stereotype. Asian parents want their kids to either be a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, an engineer. And
Yeah.
yeah, and when they've been investing in sports with me like for a very long time, when I found bodybuilding, they were not thrilled at all. Absolutely not. So when I graduated and go to university, I picked sports and exercise science because after track and field, um, I wanted to become a personal trainer. So how that happened, when I fell sick, my friend was like, "Why don't you go to the gym and keep fit?" So the first gym that I signed up happened to be a gym with lots of competitors in Singapore, and that's when I discovered the sport. And people were like, "Okay, why not you go and compete?" Because I was training 3 months in, and I would get quite a number of people in Singapore industry getting very suspicious about me being on steroids because of how quickly my shoulders developed as well.
Mm.
So yeah. So so my yeah,
I
go
was
ahead.
going to ask real quick. So you talk about your parents and your family. Were your parents not athletic, or were they more white collar type of stuff where they wanted you to kind of go that route, or is it
Yeah,
Yes,
because
because
like
that's what I'm thinking, Steve.
because it seems
As
like you're
Jiggly,
extremely athletically talented, where you could have done anything. If I
yes.
feel like you could have done any sport and you would have been
But,
successful
but,
very
but as
quickly.
Jiggly says, Steve, it's almost a trope where the Chinese slash Hong Kong Singapore family vibe is, as she said already, and I know a little bit about this. The aspiration to become a doctor or high level professional is uppermost. The idea that you then avoid that and become an athlete is like, well, why do you want to be an athlete? And then not only that, she's gone to quote unquote something they hadn't even considered because the athletic part is fine. The martial art thing is fine. What the fuck are you talking about with bodybuilding? Why do you want to do that sort of thing? So in
and
terms of
you have
your
to
parental
yeah you have to
aspirations, yeah.
remember and you have to remember that when you're talking about Asian culture, it's conservative. So when I tell my mom I want to put on a bikini and get on stage, when you just hear getting a girl putting on a bikini and get on stage, you think of being a hooker and
Yeah,
not
yeah.
being a
Yeah,
bodybuilder at
see?
all.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So were
Yeah.
so were they more were they athletic at all? Like how do you get this athleticism in you? How do you get this talent for sports? Is it something in your family or is it something where you're completely different?
Oh, my parents were swimmers. Like they were
Oh,
high level
okay.
Oh, yeah.
swimmers.
There you go, cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Swimming's a
I
tough
mean,
sport. Yeah.
I don't blame them for how they felt towards me when I started because I already proved two retirements, and it's not like they didn't try to support me, right? When I was a kid, so like I can understand why they felt the way they did. But that's when they started and they say, okay, this third time's the charm. It's good that you found something that you're passionate about and you
Hmm.
like the sport very much. But if you want to go very far in it, I will give you 3 years to go pro. And if you're not turning pro in those 3 years, you're gonna quit your personal training, you're gonna quit your bodybuilding, and you're gonna go straight to med school.
Oh, wow.
And
Jeez.
I turned pro on my second year.
Oh, okay. So you're right on time. Yeah. Is that something like would they treat a son the same way and give like an ultimatum? Because I know I have some friends that are from like India, and the men in India, you're expected to get married before your old, your younger brother. Like if your younger brother gets married and he's 25 and you're 27 and you're not married yet, the parents pretty much give them the ultimatum. You need to get married within a year or else, we're gonna disown you. Is that kind of how it is in your culture as well?
Well, there are some families like that in Singapore, but Singapore is by far the most first world Asian country that you'll find. So a lot of these traditional beliefs are
Yeah.
already like long gone. So
Gotcha.
no, but funny enough, like my brother is just completely different from me. He's into like, esports, that sort of stuff. So he's not the athletic sort.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. So
Yeah.
that's
Now,
good. So,
sorry, you mentioned something a few minutes ago where you said the accusations of PEDs, which of course we will touch upon, because with your athletic background, genetically and obviously via training, your response to training, and specifically, as you said, the muscular shoulders that sort of popped out, if you like, people looking at you in a particular way as if to say she's got to be on PEDs already, in spite of the fact that you wasn't at that particular point because of how your body responded. A great deal is made of in all sports, but specifically bodybuilding when we talk about genetics. So there's a great argument to be made for you to say that you had that genetic ability to add muscle. And so good was Jiggly's genetic ability to add muscle that people already at that early stage was accusing you of using PEDs when you was not, because as I just said, your shoulders will start to pop out. So talk a little bit about how people perceived you in that way. And obviously, this arguably is perhaps where you should have been after all these things. You've done these other sports, but arguably, here's where your body's comfortable. Here's where your body's actually going to look enhanced when it's not and respond so quickly. And again, this is that perception of people with muscle as well, which we'll get into.
Okay. So I mean, when it happened, when they started, like, having the suspicions, it was just more of a casual thing. But I think the good thing about Singapore is, like, they never really dived too far into it, only because I wasn't a competitor then when there were like already the accusations. So when I started my show, I just, even from my first show, my first season on in 2022, I already just decided to be enhanced because in my position, in my perspective, it was like, why do I want to give myself not level that playing field if I'm going to compete? That's one. And also because like I've already seen, the kind of like response I can have. I wouldn't say that I add muscle very, very well. Because there are a lot of freaks in Asia that put on muscle way better than I am. But a lot for me, I would I would be lying if I didn't say that my response to drugs are exceptional. That that is kind of like what also helped to catapult a lot of my progress this year. So 2022, my first show, I stepped on stage at, okay, I'm gonna try to quote in pounds because I know like here we go in kilos.
Yeah.
Pounds, I got on stage at 110. I started off very lightweight. I'm a very lightweight though. So I'm 5'3". So I stepped on stage 2022 110. Turned pro 23 at 117. Did my pro debut 124 at 125. So that's like 40 48 kilos at the start, and then it became like 51 kilos in 22, and then 23 was like maybe Okay, I need to do the conversion better. Sorry, guys.
I've got
Because
you August of this year. You weighed 70 kilos, which for the American listeners is 154 pounds. 110 pounds, which is 50 kilograms. You were slightly less than that, so that's still a 44 pounds fucking difference in 3 years, 4 years, which is
yeah, so I
listen. Yeah, enhanced or not
the,
enhanced, that is amazing.
I started. I think the highest I got up to this off season was 161.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So I jumped from
So
125.
a 51 pound difference in what, 2021, 2022 till now, so 3 years.
But it's like muscle. Like if you look at
Oh
Jigglybuff's
yeah,
pictures in her
yeah,
log,
absolutely, yeah.
she is extremely lean. What would
Mm.
you say your body fat, went from when you were doing these kind of changes, and what was the least body fat you were able to get on stage? How low? Because women, obviously have more body fat than men, all things being considered. But
Mhm.
like for a woman to be super lean, like a woman at 10% is shredded, but a man would have to get like to 4 or 5% to be the same shredded. So women, they naturally have more body. So what was your lowest body fat, would you say, when you were that big?
So I did the in body, but I think most of my friends who are professionals, like they try to do this average body fat thing. So okay, so for the bikini class, most of the girls would be sitting around like a 10 percent kind of body fat, 10 to 11. For figure and above, like easily a lot of us will sit between like 4 to 7. So I think I was about the 5 to 6 mark. Because
Wow.
for myself in every lineup I've done, I take pride in myself. I'm always the most conditioned every single lineup I've done by far.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you look very conditioned in your pictures for sure. So that is
Yeah.
incredible. So touch upon how many pro competitions have you done so far, and how did you do in them leading up to today?
So that's when I say like a lot of this imposter syndrome that I have, because I did 2 shows in my first season, 2022. That was one in Korea, and then I did the Amateur Olympia in Las Vegas. Took the chance for myself to go and look at what the Olympians actually looked like. And then the following year, I turned pro in the Philippines. And then I didn't, then in 2024, I did my pro debut back in Korea. Plus home show. When you do your first show, you're like, okay, I was an amateur. Now I'm gonna go back as a pro and try to see the judges again. So altogether, I've only done 4 shows and only one pro show. So that's when I say like I know I don't sound like it with the kind of like baseline knowledge that I have and the
Mm.
experience that I have. But that is really the reality of it, of like what my journey looked like. And I would just say that apart from having very good response and like a journey, like a very successful journey, I would be lying if I said like I didn't have very good support, because I did meet the right people when I got started, like had a very good trainer, a very good mentor, and also like got involved with the right coaches as well.
Yeah, I
It seemed,
noticed.
yeah, I
Sorry,
was gonna
Steve.
say, yeah, go ahead.
In her log, you actually wrote about this, Jiggly. You said in your log, and I wrote down phrase "thinking like a pro," and in brackets I wrote "see switching coaches," and you actually wrote something to the effect. This is just again late last week, Steve, where Jiggly wrote something about needing. There was nothing the matter with the last coach, but I need to change coaches because I need to think like a professional and I need to be taking myself to the next level. And I think that perhaps this change is what's going to help me take to the next level. And Steve and I was actually talking, Jiggly, just before you came on here in the pre-show,
Mm-hmm.
saying, the idea that how professionals are supposed to think, what professionals are supposed to do. And one of those things is whether or not you need a coach. We've just seen this with, I've forgotten his fucking name, but he's a very high-level American pro. He's actually going to coach himself for the next competition. We'll see how that works out. But also this
Okay.
idea that, as a professional, how do I take myself to the next level? How do I become an elite bodybuilder? And if the necessity of thinking about your training all the time, thinking about your food all the time, thinking about your PDs all the time, thinking about how you present on stage all the time, and I've done this with other athletes, how you respond to the judges, your level of confidence when you walk on stage. And it's literally tiny things. And as a female athlete, even the obvious stuff that the men don't have to do to a very small degree, women have to do a much greater degree, is presentation, Steve. Nails, hair,
Yeah.
eyelashes, the whole fucking thing. And one more thing, Jiggly, which you'll appreciate. and I've actually spoke to a female athlete about this recently. Women's outfits are stupidly fucking expensive for shows, Steve. Thousands of dollars. Whereas there's a man with a pair of fucking posing briefs on might be a couple of $100 for two pairs. The
100%.
literal two-piece or one piece can be thousands of dollars per show.
Like just the makeup alone when you pay per show is like what, 300 USD?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's
which is why
something.
like
Yeah.
some of my
But
girlfriends, they will do their own makeup. But I'd say like, it's give and take because for like the ladies, we do our nails, we do our hair. But I'd say like,
Yeah.
it's a one time per competition. I think the guys it's more expensive because they spend more on their cycles.
yeah, definitely. Men
So it
definitely
adds
It's
need.
up.
weird.
It's like
It's
chemical
weird, Jiggly.
warfare. Yeah.
One of the female athletes at our gym, Steve, just competed. She did. I think she came fourth. Looked very good, and had been prepping for the show for over 20 weeks. I think it was 28 fucking weeks in total. It was ridiculously long. And she mentioned, I said, "Oh, what's the cost of your outfit?" She said, "We'll have to have two outfits, Steve." And she wasn't actually buying them; she was hiring them for the weekend, and it would be the equivalent of about $300-400 just to hire them. I said, "Well, how much would the single piece?" Well, single piece would be about $1,000, and the two piece would be something like $800-900. And you can't really wear these for multiple shows. In other words, it's one show and done. And in the next show, you're not supposed to wear the same outfit. You've got to look different, which is a vibe that men don't have to deal with. But I was also thinking again, as we said here, that the thought process of being a professional bodybuilder versus an amateur. Amateur, you're going to go back to your day job. Amateur, you might be competing for the love of the sport. Now that you've got your pro card, it's that thought process of being a pro, whether that is, as you put in your log, getting a new coach to take yourself to the next level, but also your approach to the sport now.
Yeah.
It matters because there's a career here. It matters because you could move forward in the sport even more than you already do. So that's what I was getting at, the idea of thinking like a pro versus thinking like an amateur.
So
That's an
talk a
outfit
little.
for women.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about that, Jiggly. But also, I wanted to ask you: do you feel like it's an advantage that you kind of went a different direction when you were younger, and then now you got into bodybuilding versus your peers who you're competing against, who've probably been doing this 10, 15, 20, 25 years, and who may be burned out at this point, where you're more new to this and it's more fresh to you. You've been doing this a few years only. Do you find that an advantage or a disadvantage?
Um, it could go both ways actually. That's a very good question. Because when I did my pro debut, it was a lineup with 30 plus girls. Obviously, when I'm going from amateur to pro and then pro, it's free for all. Like you're in the open waters, huge lineup, and everyone looks good. And then you look around, you see like the girls are pretty chill, like they don't care. And then you're down there like looking around, panicking a little bit. You can see who's seasoned and you can see who's not. Literally, like this is not their first rodeo. I've spoken to quite a few girls. Some of them are Olympians that we see. And this is what their 40th show. So it was very interesting to hear and like to speak to these people. As advantage, I would say right now I can say it's an advantage only if you make it to be. So why I say this is because like a lot of my goal, and you will hear this to be very common with a lot of very genetically gifted athletes. To be honest,
Yeah,
if your lineup
yeah,
was good and you turn pro with good combination, your genetics are easily like above average. I would say that.
yeah.
But that's besides the point. Yeah, what I'm trying to say is you hear this a lot about genetically gifted athletes. Have you spoken to a very like gifted athlete and they are like completely empty out there in the head? They don't know like you talk to them about certain things and they're very clueless because
Yes, yes.
I've met people like that, and it's mind blowing to me because you then have like very dedicated athletes who put in the hard work and try to maximize every single variable and they just don't respond, and it's sad, but that's the reality of it, right? Like I see that with people. So a lot of my personal belief is you only know true potential if you try to maximize every single factor that you can control.
Yes.
And
I mean,
and to
let me jump. Sorry, let me jump in, Jiggly. So I've competed in the past, and I've gone to competitions where I know I'm going to be in the top three, just looking up and down the lineup, like you said, in my own sport. 18 athletes, and I know that I'm going to be top three no matter what. I've been approached at a
Mhm.
competition by someone who should, Steve, have fucked me over big time, but literally came up and said to me, "You're a legend," before we'd even started the competition. I thought, well, that's you done. I'm going to do you. If you've got the genetics as Jiggly has, and that attitude and the drive and determination to get the most out of the sport, that's where you will become number one. Because if it doesn't matter if you've got good genetics and no brains and no drive, or all drive and no genetics, you need that combination. And I think Jiggly's actually doing it in the right way, because we're talking about this now. She's literally thinking about how to maximize, how to be the best, looking up and down the lineup, making that kind of judgment, and working her ass off, and maybe having an athletic background. It's that combination, Jiggly, that will enable you to succeed by having all those factors in play, but working your fucking ass off and being determined to be the best. Never mind your genetics. But if you've got
No,
that,
yeah,
then
you
absolutely you
literally,
win.
yeah, you literally took like the words out of my mouth. That was what I was going to say, because I just thought to myself, like, since I'm already blessed with this, and this is something that I don't take for granted, where you see like a lot of people just take their
Yeah,
genetics for granted to
yeah,
like
yeah,
half-ass their shit. And then to me, it's like you only know potential. I was like, if I have that kind of knowledge that a lot of people don't have, combined
yeah,
with what I have, I mean, obviously there are a lot of people with better genetics than I am, because we are all on a spectrum. But if I can combine like that knowledge with what I'm already given, which is way better than most people,
mm.
it would be fucking dangerous. It's fucking dangerous.
Yes, yes.
You'll become a weapon.
Unbeatable, unbeatable. The
And
person
I
I'm
and
thinking
I
of,
and
the one I'm thinking of, Jiggly, was he outweighed me by 20 kilos. I think he still lived with his mum and he was kind of simple, bless him. But he outweighed me by 20 kilos. His wrist structure would be bigger than mine. His knee structure was bigger than mine. Physically, he should absolutely handed me my ass. But mentally, I won't call him a child because that would be unkind. But he saw me as a level above, whereas physically he should have been a level above me. So in that situation, for you to have those combination of factors, genetically, the background, the drive from your parents, your upbringing, and whatever else, and then to be able to bring to the table the kick ass, you will. It's going to be like a Terminator thing. You're just going to go over people, and that's arguably how you need to be. It's not a nice thing in terms of how people might perceive you, but how the fuck do you become a world beater? How the fuck do you become world class if you don't act, think, and do world class shit? You absolutely have to think like that. Steve, I love the fact that we're having this conversation, because it's going to be, it's the next level for people. I talk
Yeah.
about the mind in
This is how a
bodybuilding
lot of
all
people
the time.
are
Yeah,
around the
all
world.
the time.
I don't think we understand that in the American society. I grew up with some of that, as well in my culture, and it
Yeah.
was always like that, in my culture as well. So let's talk about Jiggly. Let's get into your diet and training before we get into the
Yes, yes,
PED
yes,
stuff,
yes,
and
yes.
and let's touch upon your diet. So tell us. I'm looking at your typical diet that your coach has you on that you posted. And it looks like here you're at 200 protein, 80 fat, and 360 carbs. So you're getting a lot more carbs than people would think. A lot of women out there who, whether they compete or not compete, are scared of carbs. I mean, I've dated women that are like, oh my God, I can't have fat. I can't have carbs. I gotta be scared of them. But you're going a very strong amount of carbs. Tell us about that strategy. It seems like a lot of the carbs that you're getting are coming from the rice, are coming from blueberries, oats, vegetables, and stuff like that. So tell us about the method to the madness when it comes to your carb intake and protein intake.
okay, so I definitely do handle food way more than the average girl, even this level that I'm at. It's just where I've always been able to get lean very quickly, but where I always fail, and until now, I mean, that's half the reason why I switched my coach, because from the last yeah, three shows that I've done, um, it was good enough to kind of like get me in the mix, like in pro show, like first pro show, already first call out of like 35 girls. But I know like it's not my best look and not what my body is capable of when it took me like 3 weeks afterwards to fill out. So that's just like what my baseline typically looks like, because I can handle a lot of food, and compared to most people, I can stay relatively lean in the off season. But to answer your question, I think what my coach currently is trying to do is we're kind of like in a pre-prep phase, so we're kind of like in a recom kind of period where it's kind of like not high enough to get body fat high, but it's also like just nice to keep thyroid metabolism there, because what drives your T4 and T3 conversion from your T4 is just ensuring that your carbs are high enough, right? Like, if you need to reset your thyroid, you kind of have to bump carbs. So, and if you don't have the carbs, you're not going to be able to train hard. Now, I find that this is just my personal observation, but so the two of you feel free to chip in, and I think the listeners will be very interested to hear this. A lot of my style with training is that I like volume with the upper body, not so much with legs, but more so upper body, because for me right now, I don't need to volumize my lower body too much. Um, so we do have the myofibrillar style of training, and then you hear about sarcoplasmic, and then some people are like, oh, like I do low volume, I don't do high volume, um, that sort of stuff. To me, I've noticed that the people who do the volume stuff, where they have sufficient intensifiers, they can handle more food because there is more glycogen turnover.
Yes.
And you
Yes. So
see,
let
and
me
you
jump.
see
Let me jump in for a second there, then, Jiggly. So I observe too much volume in a great and vast majority of the men on the forums, and I talk about this constantly. My volume, by comparison, is incredibly low, and I'm a big, strong fella. And yet, I will see guys with what I will say the typical, normal man, average genetics, doing pro level volume, and only a handful of them, and I've to arguably it's the Australians that do incredibly well with 2 or 3 of the American members, have the genetics to respond to that. We actually used to talk about Monstro, Pret Wabber Pro, and his volume was up there, but he was a professional bodybuilder and he was doing exhibitions and a bunch of other stuff. So you go, okay, for you, and this is the most important thing, and I tell people this all the time. Number one, your training needs to work. It's no good copying a pro if your training doesn't turn you into a pro. It needs to work. Number two, and you're quite correct, if you would need to fuel what you're doing in able to be capable of doing it, and also, as we can see in Jiggly's pictures, listeners, see the fucking response. There's no good putting loads of food in and doing high volume if the hypertrophy, the muscle, doesn't exist. That's because a professional does it. You don't have the genetics. Jiggly knows her genetics. She's working with a coach. They've obviously varied the food at times with previous coaches and previous training. And I can say, just by looking at the pictures, it absolutely fucking works. It needs to work for you. My volume, which is way, 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 way less, needs to work for me. You can't do what other people are doing. You need to do what works for you. And Jiggly, I believe, obviously, because she's a professional and she's got the physique to present it, absolutely does what works for her. Now, whether it ever continues to work or continue to respond or need changing at some point in the future is something that she would need to work out with her coach. But again, that's more for the benefit of the listeners. Jiggly already knows this fucking works because we can see that it works.
I think you can think about it both ways, right? Like, okay, so what I was going to say, the people who do high volume during peak week, you can see a difference when they are flat versus full. Whereas people who are very low volume, very top set, back of set kind of style, it's what adds the muscle tissue. They are very thick kind of people, but they not necessarily are very bubbly. That's when I tell people, they say, which is better? I said, well, you need both, because myofibrillar style of training, what adds muscle will keep muscle when you're deep in the prep. So you need the weights to be high. But at the same time, it's like if you want to be able to tolerate the food and you want that very full, bubbly, kind of detailed look, of course, while a lot of that is genetic, you can learn to bias your training towards this sort of stuff. And you made a very good point over there, like not copying what other people are doing. It's crazy to me how in this day and age, like you would think that it's such a straightforward thing, even with the cycles, the training, the nutrition, but people still think that there's like one size fit all, and it doesn't, because especially like when you're just starting out and you're learning how to train, you can't do low volume entirely, right? I think high volume works to a certain extent because it teaches the beginners to actually learn how to fucking train hard and to actually learn how to practice the reps and be precise. But like yourself, you're already advanced, and we are all three of us, we are effective with training, that we can get away with less if we need to. But at the same time, like you the after a certain point, these people also need to learn that if they're doing so much and they're not responding or growing, then obviously, while a lot of things is, pro levels can handle, the pros can handle what they're doing, they also need to take a step back and kind of reevaluate how they're doing it. And then you can also think about it in a different perspective. It's like, well, how do we know that the pros are actually doing the right stuff? Because I'll be honest, sometimes I look at the way some people
Yeah.
train and they're like top level, but they train like shit. And
Yeah.
and that's when that's why you don't copy people. Like straight up, don't copy people at all, because they don't even know that it's not working for them, but because their genetics are so good, then anything would go.
Mm.
So you have to learn from
I'm
people
just thinking,
who,
Soggy Jiggly, one of the biggest mistakes even professionals make is in peak week that you refer to. A great example, Dorian Yates said, even though he ended up with injuries, he said, I didn't understand why people eased off, because then they're going to lose muscle tone in the last 10 days because they stopped training heavy. The other thing that you mentioned, which is very important actually, and again, it's for peak week tip from Jiggly, is the ability to consume food and therefore look full rather than flat would come down to the energy output, what you've put out versus what's going in, and the body wanting to store it. If you suddenly slack off in the last few weeks, ease back because you're approaching peak week and it's very hard and you're tired, your body might change, as we know that it does, especially in the last 10 days, 7 days, 5 days, 4 days. The idea that you suddenly ease off the gas and now your body goes, well, I don't need this glycogen. And that's the one time you want to be full as fuck and vascular, as well as carrying all the lean muscle tissue. That's the trick. That really is the trick. And I think it's just part of it. And I'll take myself as an example again. It's because it's so goddamn hard to do anything, food, train, thinking about it, whatever else, in the last 10 to 14 days. I know that I felt like a dog that had been beaten up, or a beaten up old man. And if I didn't have shit written down, or I wasn't, in your case, working with a coach, I'm not sure that I would fucking be on point or be 100% ready, especially for stage as you was, versus, for example, and again, like I said, that's probably where people make the most mistakes. And you've literally worked for 50 something weeks of the year to get ready for those last 2 weeks where everything's going to change and transform, look amazing. And it's so easy. James Hollins said, it's a great example. Looks amazing 2 weeks out, doesn't quite look amazing when he's on stage compared to other athletes. And yet he's an absolute fucking freak. What is he doing in the last 2 weeks, 10 days, whatever else? That maybe he's easing off the gas. And this is the thing. And again, this is that professional thinking, Steve, that Jiggly literally needs to be aware of every nuance and response to her body. This is a question I got for you. How do you stay aware? How do you keep track of these things? It's obviously you, but also working with your coach to know these little things and to notice when they're occurring to you and make sure to take advantage of the good ones and get rid of the bad ones. How do you know about that?
like with training, or what's your question exactly? Like, specifically
Both,
targeting.
both, both with training and your nutritional response, because that's what we were talking about with the food, but obviously put the training and food together. So allowing yourself to present the best physique you possibly can versus people that have lost fullness or coming flat or lose muscle tone or whatever else. You obviously are aware of it. That's the reason why we're talking about it. So how did you become aware, and how do you keep track of that when you're super tired coming in for a competition?
No, I think it's just like, I've always been very like intuitive. So I know like it's problematic because like show after show, I always struggle to get a pump backstage. And I think like a lot of it comes to do with the fact that, I come from a very humid country. So Singapore is very humid and hot. So when you're going to like a different country to compete when it's usually a colder or like a drier weather, it takes time for you to actually find that sweet spot with the electrolyte balance. Um, so I found that, what I really needed was like really to just like spam the salt. Like at some point, I was like, okay, I don't need to track salt anymore. I just actually need to like just ramp up that salt shaker and like slam many salt packets. Because like if there's no salt, I can't pull the water and the
Yeah.
carbs to kind of like volumize the food. Um, yeah, that was that. As with training, that's always going to be a work in progress. So I think it's very interesting that you mentioned that, because I feel like at some point, all of us are going to be able to understand what kind of, like, be able to nail the cycles, because after a while, all of us just stick to what works. Everyone overcomplicates like PEDs And they're like, oh, let me
Yeah.
try this combination of this combination. And no, actually,
Yes.
after a while, you
Yes.
realize you talk to like all the veterans, and it's just the same shit. Maybe like here and there, different doses and different breaks.
This idea, isn't there, Julie? This is a great idea. We see this such a lot in where we have these interviews. So obviously we're asking people exactly what they're doing, but you still see discussed, especially amongst the younger male lifters, this idea that there's some sort of secret combination we're not being told about. And especially when it comes to training, you go, no, it's hard training. It's really, really strict diets. And arguably, especially with the genetically superior athletes, male or female, very simple, very straightforward cycles that are quite often nowhere near as complicated or convoluted or high dosing as people think, because again, they have a great response. They have a great response to food, training, and PEDs. And yes, they might experiment with trend. Yes, they might look at some of the things that are out there. But ultimately, you go with what works, and you go, well, what works is test, what works is growth, what works is this. And I look the fucking way that I do. Do I need to do anything stupid or experimental or crazy when I
because
already
it's like
look?
if it's working, why are you changing it?
Yeah. Yeah, if
So-
I'm coming on stage and I'm getting first or second place, I don't need to suddenly double the dose for my next competition. I just maybe need to fucking go up or down 100 grams, milligrams or 200 milligrams just to bring in dry, just to bring in full or whatever. That's it.
Yeah. So
Let's
I said,
let's
like,
talk a little bit about that as well, because as I said to Jiggly in the pre-show, when we were discussing the topics we were going to talk about today, and again, this is for the benefit of the listener. So we're going to discuss a little bit of Jiggly's PED stack. One of the comments that she made in her log, which I was fascinated by, one was, obviously, as a professional, I'm not just going to be using a recommended dose of 5 milligrams of Anavar. I obviously need to think in a particularly different way. But one of the things that she especially commented on, and I made a note of this, was female athletes, and specifically, obviously, Jiggly, knowing what she responds to and what works for her, obviously is going to be still a fraction of what a typical male athlete does, especially at the higher level. But nevertheless, it was that awareness of what works. So let's get into a little bit of let's approach this thing first, just to get this out of the way. And I'm going to talk about some part of this later on. So the first things first is most people outside of the sport would struggle with the idea of any of us, male or female, using steroids. And then they struggle more with the idea of women using steroids. Now, I come from the strength side, so I know I've literally met some of the world's strongest women. I've trained with their partners and so on and so forth. I've trained with world's strongest men level athletes at times and competed against them, and seen some of the female athletes at those kind of competitions. So I'm well aware that female athletes are going to use steroids. It's not a problem for me. But the public perception, but as you already said, you needed to think in that particular way in order to take things to the next level. But let's talk a bit about that, just the idea of women using steroids, and then talk about your own specific stack that we talked before we talk about responses to PEDs.
Okay, so I think for me it was like a very easy decision because you could think about it this way. Obviously, like for the person who doesn't understand the sport, they're going to be very apprehensive towards steroids. And you can't blame them, because sometimes when people are against something, it's coming from a place of ignorance and fear, because they read a lot of reports that are over exaggerated. Like it's like how people over exaggerate trend to be like a demonized drug, but then they will ramp up their DNP or like overdose their test. And does that sound okay to using, and then compared to like low dose trend, it doesn't make sense. It's like a very similar kind of like mindset that I have, that people have. So what I feel, it's like you could, overdo your alcohol, you can drink excessively, eat like shit as a regular lifestyle person. And then when I use steroids, but I'm safe and my bloods are fine, but you think that's not okay. Like, make that make sense.
Yeah, it's weird, because I've said this on multiple shows, how the average American adult is on 5 prescribed medications, and yet the media and the perception people have about steroids is unreal. Go, okay, you're literally on 5 medications, and most athletes, yourself included, will be on none because you're healthy as fuck, and you're training and you're doing fitness and you're eating clean. So you're on 0 or very small amounts of prescription medications versus the average person. Lots of people smoke, lots of people drink. And again, as athletes, we drink in very small amounts, if at all. I have never smoked ever. So hang on, you're smoking, you're drinking, you're on 5 prescription medications. I'm doing none of the above or very little of the above. And you're worried about me taking steroids. Motherfucker, you got way more problems than I have. So yeah, that
100%.
perception is weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But more so the societal thing in regards to women. But obviously, you said in a way it's absolutely a decision you had to make in order to be the high level athlete you are. Talk a little bit about your actual stack. I'm looking here early. This is the beginning of your log. I'll read this out for the benefit of the listeners, and you can discuss parts of this if you want to. So Jiggly said back in August, 100 EQ, this would be milligrams, 100 milligrams of EQ weekly, 50 milligrams of Primo weekly, 8 IUs of growth hormone daily, that's relatively high, 3 milligrams of Reta weekly, that's about right, and 5 IUs of Lantus, I'm assuming that's an insulin type product, daily.
Yeah.
So talk about your stack. This is then, or if you want to, talk about your stack now, whichever you like.
Okay, so this is for the benefit of the listeners as well. This was not my first cycle. So if you think like this is, and this should not be any girl's first cycle. My first cycle was way less than this. So this is when people say like, how do you know that you can tolerate and you could do this? This is going to be like a very interesting part. I mean, I'm having fun like talking about these stuff. My first cycle, obviously, because I didn't know if I was going to be doing this long term, especially when my parents put a deadline on me, right? But also they can put a deadline, and for like as a young athlete, you would think like, okay, deadline means they will want to like blast and get to their goal as soon as possible. But for me, because I also wanted to prove, if you want to get your parents' support, you kind of have to like also show people that you can do this safely and do this smartly. So it's a two-way thing. So I turned pro on 50 milligrams of Anavar. I mean, not 50 milligrams. Sorry, that came out wrong. 50 milligrams of Primo a week, 10 milligrams of Anavar, and towards the end of the last 4 weeks, maybe like 10 milligrams of Steno, and obviously there was a little bit of Clem, but relatively that is quite on the low end. And at that point, I haven't touched GH, so I know like that's very much like on the lower end in terms of like for competitive females, what their Primo would typically sit at. And then when it came to my pro debut, so I was doing this 50 milligram cycle, 2022 first season, 23 did that, turned pro, and then 24. At some point, when you compete at this level, or even just picking up cycle experience, your body doesn't respond to the same first cycle. It's not going to be that way again. So at some point, if you still need to put on more muscle, even though you have the genetics to respond, you will require a little bit more at some point. So for my pro debut, we did bump the Primo highest, 100 milligrams, and then we did sprinkle in some Mastron as well. And then because like I was on the Primo for like 25 weeks, and this is my thought process. If by week 6, week 7, week 8, week 10, I have 0 side effects, I probably can tolerate this shit. So that's when, like, after the show, like, after the pro debut, we dropped off some stuff. And obviously, you would think most athletes would come off. Usually that's the case. But when I speak to some of my friends, it's like, it's similar to the guys. If you have no problems, don't need to change it. So that's when, like, arguably, I actually cruised on 75 Primo from 2024, September. And then that was the first time I sprinkled in the GH at just like 3-4 IUs. And then I ramped it up slowly. But when I touched the GH, I mean, I was already good with gear, but when I touched the GH, that's when I exploded this year. Along with like, refining the training. So when people talk about, the cycles for females and everything, you mentioned like the GH being a little bit higher. It's only because I respond so damn well, even on low dose GH.
Yes.
Then it's like if I have the budget to maximize the GH, why the fuck would I not do that? Because it is much safer to blast my GH than to blast my AAS.
Yeah. I mean, the obvious thing here is if I look at the typical member on Evolutionary, and again, the typical listener listening to the show, AIUs of GH daily would be one, as you said, expensive over time, and two, you might see carpal tunnel, you might see water retention, and as that's much about response, it is about diet and condition and training and so on. But obviously, again, it's worth mentioning again. The fact of the matter is thus: as Jiggly is A, genetically advantaged as an athlete with an athletic background, and B, a professional bodybuilder. She has a pro card, and so when I look at, for example, the other professionals or pro level athletes that we've had on these shows or talked about on the forums, AIUs isn't high. It's just high for the average listener or high for the average evolutionary member. And again, they wouldn't be running it year round or long term, relatively short terms, and so on and so forth. So I'm just looking at it on that basis. But the other way to look at it, if I looked at your cycle as a whole, and if I looked at your cycle as a whole, thinking that you were a professional bodybuilder, in the class that you compete in, is shit. It's tiny. It's fractional. The 100 EQs. This is again August. 100 EQs a week versus 400 as a minimum for most of the listeners that be running a stack using EQ. Heck, I might use EQ myself, and it's not going to be anywhere near 100 EQ.
Yeah.
So again, it's very much a case of there's a perception, perhaps also for professional bodybuilders, male or female. Oh, we're supposed to be using tons. No, use what works. There's very much a case of if you change this cycle from where you was to where you are now to what you're running right this particular minute, and they're all tiny amounts really, but they work for you. But I was getting at a little bit earlier on the idea of women using it. But again, you are trying to become a professional athlete. You are trying to be that kind of person. So people need to think differently. They need to figure out what works. Yeah. Steve, have you got any questions, Steve, with regards to the PV side?
Yeah, Mobster. As you can tell, Mobster, he likes to talk for sure. It's hard to really. So let's we have a few minutes left. Let's make sure we give you the floor on this one. Let me ask you about Retruditride. And how has that been a game changer for you? What's been the maximum dosage you've done with it, and what has it done to really help you excel?
Yeah.
Okay, so I leverage this more so for the nutrient partitioning benefits that it has in the off season, because I'm not trying to blunt my appetite in the off season. So people will say like, oh, doesn't it blunt your appetite? Well, like Mobster says, and everyone here should be able to kind of understand like the gist of the message from today's podcast. It's also like, it's very person dependent, right? Like I have friends who take 1 milligram and they really can't eat. Whereas for me, when I started at my sweet spot at 2 milligrams, it was fine, reached at 2.5, and then I struggled to eat a little bit. So that's when I started to pull back, and then I increased the dosage over time to one where I want, so because it pulls, basically gets your body more efficient running on fat. And then it also gets you to detox the liver off the fat as well. So I see that as, if you're more efficient at using fat as fuel, then it would actually preserve a lot of muscle glycogen for you to actually use in training itself. So that is my thought process with retatrutide. As far as the results gone, like I used it peak, not really peak, but mid off season. So that was earlier March this year that I started it. Good enough for me, because at that point I was on the same amount of food, same diet, exact same kind of food, same amounts for at least 5-6 weeks. So that's when I sprinkled in the retatrutide, and because I knew that the amount of food wasn't going to change for me, and then I did see like composition changes as well. So I do like that drug mainly for that. People use it mainly to blunt their appetite and to shut down food noise. I use it more for nutrient partitioning, and I think it's useful for females particularly, because if I were to kind of like help a girl design her cycle and everything, I would always start those with like peptides or even things like injectable L-carnitine first. And anything AES related, NFR would be right at the bottom of my list for most people, for most girls, because females nutrient partitioning abilities are not as good as guys. So maximize that first.
Wow, that's really that's dropping some knowledge right there. Talk about some of the steroids that you've used, or maybe the dosing of those steroids that you use that have been counterproductive to you.
Yes, good, bad rather than good. Yeah.
I'll be honest, I have not hit a deleterious dose, but that's how I know I can tolerate the doses I've had, because I can run very long. And at 100 milligrams is considered like high for some people. Whereas some people get virilization side effects from just like 10 milligrams of NFR. but I'm straight, I'm fine.
Okay.
Like I have not run into that issue, and I hope I don't. But that's why, like, I just monitor very carefully. But what I about a lot of these things, like female side effects, it's person dependent. I personally do find that there's always a way to manage these very well. So my personal thought process is this: the more muscle you have, the more androgen receptors that you have. So if you have fuck all muscle and you bump your doses to, and the same for the guys, you have
Wow.
only so many receptors that you have to kind of like bind to, maybe like your 100 milligrams of that, no, your 500 milligrams of test. Let's say 500 milligrams is too high for a dude with not as much muscle, and then they are experiencing side effects. Why? Because maybe like 50% of it is already saturated, and then the other 50% is binding to other tissue that's giving the side effects. That's what I see with the women. The other thing is that I think, just like guys, I think females should try their best to do daily injections as well, because sometimes it's not the drug that turns a lady into a guy. It's more so because, like, okay, what differentiates a guy between a girl? The test to estrogen ratio. Guys have more
Yeah,
test to estrogen, ladies
yeah,
have more estrogen to test. Um,
yes.
so when girls sometimes run into side effects, sometimes I consider, like, can we look at their blood work before they started their cycle? Because if their estrogen was barely existent and then they introduce an androgen, that is going to shift the hormone profile towards something that's very male dominant, and that's when you start to
Yeah.
see issues. That's one thought. That's one theory that I have, and I think, and some of the coaches actually do agree with me as well. The other theory that I have is, if you introduce androgens at a very, very baseline, very safe amounts, or like, microdosing it on a day-to-day basis, the body doesn't feel those spikes, and you don't hit that virilization threshold just by, like, spiking, just like guys when you pin like a big bolus dose like twice a week, and then you get like the swings. Um, I find that to be something that females can learn to manage over time a little bit better as well.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
some that's
I
some
mean,
big knowledge. Yeah.
that's theoretically 100% because we've talked about guys will argue to toss about steroids and go, hang on, if you're fatter than he is, if you don't train as hard, if your food is shit, why would the fuck would you respond? Even if everything else was genetically the same, why would your response be the same as my response? It wouldn't. If I'm leaner than you, if I train harder than you, my diet's
Yeah.
better than yours, I should have a better response.
There's no
Let me
black
ask
and
you.
white. There's no black
No,
and white
no, no, no.
answer. Everyone could
We try
be.
to generalize on these shows, Steve, but we can't unless we have a person on the log, on the forums, or on the show. Then we get the kind of information
Yeah.
specific to the
Well, let me
athlete.
ask.
Let me,
Let me
yeah,
before you jump in.
I was going to ask her this, just Steve. More of an encouraging word from Jiggly to encourage women to go to put a message out there for women that want to train, that want to get muscular. Jiggly, your experience, and try to encourage women listeners, women athletes on our forum to get to the gym to train and not be afraid of putting on muscle.
It's not that easy to put on muscle. That's what I will tell them, because like a lot of girls are, oh, I don't want to go to the gym because I don't want to look too bulky. I just want to look toned. Well, if you want to look toned, you still need to put on muscle, because what gives a muscle shape, you kind of like have to put on the muscle. So for one, it's not that easy to put on muscle. A lot of people think that just by touching a 5 kilo dumbbell, it's going to get them some muscle. But the other thing I do want to share is that I think a lot of most times with females, the only person who's judging yourself is you, because honestly, when you go to the gym, like, nobody actually is paying attention to you
Yeah,
as much as you think you are. So sometimes people feel very intimidated going to the gym. I never experienced that, because to me it was just like another public place. When you go to a
yeah,
shopping mall, it's the same as you just going to a gym. Of course, you see, maybe some big dudes are a little bit scary, but I think for the most part, if you are, let's say you do not even know what to do and how to use a certain machine, if
Yeah.
you're polite, you practice good gym etiquette, and you need help in the gym, just
yeah,
stopping someone, like, some intimidating dude, to teach you how to work around, like, the machine, how to use it. I think
yeah.
you'll be surprised at how many people would actually be willing to help you out.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes the gym
Absolutely.
can be like an egotistical place. So with men, it's like more the opposite effect. Like men actually go to the gym to intimidate people and to show off their body and to show off their strength.
But
And
it's
that's,
weird, Steve, because what you'll see, and I think Jiggly just said that, and you and I are actually good examples of this. You go, if you turn up with veins and a six pack looking lean and you've just been hot yoga and all the rest of it, if I turn up at 300 plus pounds squatting fucking 800 pounds, we should be quote unquote intimidating. And yet, ironically, the biggest, most muscular men and women are, if so long as you're not interrupting the workout, they're probably going to be the most helpful. It's the ones that want to be big and muscular or want to be gorgeous looking or whatever
Yeah.
else that tend to have the biggest chip on their shoulder. So I actually think Jiggly's right. Don't be afraid of going to the gym. You won't turn into Superman unless you absolutely have Superman
So
genetics.
let's, yeah.
And the meanest, ugliest motherfucker, male or female, will probably be the person that's going to give you the best advice or show you how to do something or whatever. Yeah.
So before we let you go, Jiggly, what does your future look like? Do you plan on one day standing at the Mr. Olympia stage and being the champion there? Is that something that you're striving for? What are your goals in going forward?
Obviously, it would be nice to get on the Mr. Olympia stage. That's always the goal. But I try to exercise, a lot of self-grace because when I started competing or like bodybuilding, it was more so because I was just done being sick. As a skinny kid, I think like I honestly already achieved far more than I thought I would because when I started bodybuilding, I didn't even know what a pro card was. I
Mm.
competed in pro qualifiers, not actually. I wouldn't say not to aim to turn pro, but I was more resigned to the fact that if I keep chasing the improvements in this lifetime, if I'm meant to go pro, I will go pro. Far too many people and people just starting out, they immediately want that pro card, and a lot of people think that they can be an Olympian. And to me, it's like, they're just taking that status itself is just taking the fun out of the sport already. That's why you see a lot. How do you know someone doesn't actually enjoy the lifestyle for what it is? Just look at them when they're done competing. Are they still training? Are they still eating? Because if the answer
Yes.
is no,
Yes.
I think a lot of people start out bodybuilding for intrinsic reasons, and you can tell who are those who do it for the superficial reasons, for the status and everything. So,
Yes.
okay, so for the future itself, I'm just having fun putting on muscle, man. Like, I do plan to get on stage, but this is the funny one because I started in figure, and then the last year I put on quite a fair bit of muscle that my
Yeah.
coach has had me checking in women's physique poses as well. And he said, like, as the year goes, as I prep for like July, August next year, if it works out well and I look better in women's physique poses, we might actually move up. Because realistically speaking, with how I'm going, I don't see myself like in another 2 years in a division that I'm doing. And to me, it's like, oh, cool, like that's fine with me because I'm having fun. To me, a lot of the fun actually comes in the off season and putting on muscle. I haven't really thought very much about like when I'm getting on stage, even though like the timeline is set for me, because I'm just having fun in general. I'm trying to stay present because I won't get to do this forever. None of us will. So
No.
um
No, you got
yeah.
one. I wrote down while you were talking. Enjoy the journey, enjoy the process. Don't think necessarily
Yeah.
just of the end game or the end target. Have fun being
Yeah.
you, training
If you're
and
not
enjoying
having
your
fun,
results
then
and
what the
being
hell is the
strong. Yeah.
point, you know?
Yes,
And
exactly.
that's the
You're
thing.
just going to end up doing something else when you retire. I want to train forever. I don't want to fucking sort of just because I don't compete anymore. Of course, I still fucking train. It's what I do.
So
It's part of who I am.
So one last question for you, JigglyBuff. You're extremely knowledgeable on this stuff. I mean, it seems like you've
Yes.
been doing this for 20
Oh,
years.
yeah.
How have you rapidly gained knowledge? Has it been through your coaching? Has
Mm.
it been through the forum? What's been your secret
Self,
to
very
rapidly?
self-aware. Very
Wow.
self-aware. Yeah.
As far as the self-awareness goes, I think when I started out, because of the risk involved in this sport, and because I
Mm.
already knew what I took and I shared with you guys, like I just wanted to be different because I don't want to be just someone with muscle and no brains. Like
Yes.
in my opinion, like my achievements along the way, I should be able to help people in the
Yeah.
different ways that I know how. That's when I started coaching. Um, yeah. That all this knowledge, I would say like it's when I met my current boyfriend because he is very seasoned in this whole bodybuilding thing. So it was kind of nice because when I hired a coach, no matter how you trust your coach, if you're starting your first cycle, there's always going to be some risk and it's always a bit scary. So it was nice for me to kind of like have someone who was very experienced by my side. And I would say I am far luckier than most girls whose boyfriends who
Mm.
put them on a cycle and then it becomes a terrible shitstorm. But my boyfriend was like
Yes.
that, yeah, to kind of like quality check the kinds of protocols I was put through, and he was also already like far along in this game. He doesn't compete, but he was there to make sure that whatever I was taking is legit accurately dose. Like you see a lot of vendors, they'll say, oh, a lot of people think like, oh, it's great that, this vendor, has exceeded the 250 milligram per ml mark. But actually, when I look for a vendor, sometimes, I look for the consistency in the dosing, especially with injectables, because for females, you can cross it by like 1 milligram on the syringe, and that can like, throw you off. For the guys, maybe you guys can tolerate a little bit better, but like for
Yeah.
ladies, and you have to be. It's not even about the dosing. You have to be very careful about making sure what you're getting is correct. So,
I think what comes across, Jiggly, is that you're thinking about every part of the process. You are sort of thinking about your response to the process. You're thinking about how these things apply. And you've got with the boyfriend, perhaps a phrase that sprang to mind with me, you've got someone to bounce these ideas off, who with their experience can bounce the idea back to you. And having that back and forth, that discussion and that debate has allowed you to think about some of the theoretical stuff as well as the practical stuff, and making sure that at every point this works for you, this applies for you. You're not just doing something generally or generic that works for women per se. It needs to work for you. It needs to be something that's applicable to you, and so on and so forth. Listen, listener, I mean, because we're going to finish the show now. That to me, and I actually said this a little bit earlier on, is where Jiggly stands out in terms of her log. So definitely come onto the forum and look at that. She's explaining some of these things on the log. She's telling you how she's arrived at the thought process. She's investigating these things constantly, not in an obsessive way, but in a way that benefits her as an athlete and enables her to take the steps forward that will beyond the pro card to the higher stages, to the more competitive arenas, and so on and so forth. And the proof, as they say with these phrases, is in the pudding. She presents a great physique as a great athlete and someone who's constantly thinking about it. Have you got any, just the last one before we finish, have you got any logs that catch your eye on the forum that you enjoy reading?
Oh, I think there's this Olympian on Evo. I think she's sponsored by UGL Aussie. I think she
Yeah.
just got on the Olympian stage for women's physique.
Yes.
Like I think
Yes.
is it Muscle
Yes.
Girl? That one. I can't I can't remember the username. But that one was fun to watch.
The one that you're on
That one
about
was
with the
fun to see.
Olympian stage had an amazing backstage photograph, arguably one of the best bicep slash side chest shots I've ever seen on any athlete. Dry as fuck, vascular shoulders. And I actually showed people at the gym that picture. So yeah, absolutely. Listen, guys, the great and vast majority of people listening to this show are going to be men, but you can learn from what JigglyBuff talks about. You can learn from the other logs. Come onto the forum and check out Jiggly's log. Come onto the forum and check out the other female athletes. You will learn how women can get into great condition, and that will help you get into condition. Thank you very much for coming on the show today, Jiggly. It's been very entertaining, more insightful than arguably we was expecting, which is great. And I would hope that you're going to inspire other athletes, men and women, to do their absolute best. Any final words, Steve, before we finish the show?
Yeah, and it just shows you that the information is out there. How Jiggly, she got information from her coaches, she got information from her boyfriend, she got information from the forums, and all came together. And she's a student of the game, and that
Yeah.
makes you to the next level. We see that in any sport. I don't care if you're playing football, soccer, basketball. If you're an actually student of the
Yeah.
sport or the skill that you're trying to get good at, then
Yeah.
you will excel much more rapidly as she's doing. So I completely expect her to go
Yeah,
as far as possible in this for sure. She's a wealth of knowledge. So definitely check her out on the forum.
yeah, Steve, I totally agree with you because I find that learning is very important. Like if you want to get better, and I think that's how I did. Don't stop learning. If you are truly passionate about
Yes.
something, wouldn't you want to like try to learn every single thing under the sun? Because when I started, I was
100%.
like
Yep.
watching podcasts, I was reading forums, I was just trying to like learn and get that info. And obviously, you don't just blindly pick up info because people just absorb. Sometimes they don't know how to filter. Learn to filter the information, and then also
Yes.
you could also learn to actually be a bit more observant because sometimes we talk about science and sometimes talk about bro science. Bro science doesn't mean it's wrong. Sometimes it's just not proven yet. So like learn as much as you can. Sometimes you can like, try it out within reason, of course, and then just pay and just observe like what are the successful people doing, what are the people who were nothing and then built something for themselves, because you can't just learn from the genetic elites. So look at those who built something from scratch and look at the way they do things,
Yes.
what's in common. And then sometimes you might actually find the secret behind it. That's how I find that, I learn to be a little more in tune. Because sometimes people don't talk about it, but sometimes trends don't lie.
Thank you very much
So
again. Please note, as always, we are not doctors and the opinions are ours. It's our view based on our experience and views on the topic. Our podcasts are for informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment applies.